Right, so today we're going to make a wrist warmer pattern that matches the ear warmer pattern I did most recently. These are great because they're so quick to make. So I'm going to show you the size small. So we'll start with a chain. And I'm going to chain 27 for the size small. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, when you've got 27, we're going to join the loop together with a slip stitch. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is HDC, so half double crochet in each one, and that's how we're going to make the rib for the cuff. Sorry, not for the cuff, for the top part of the wrist warmer. All will become clear when you see. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you should have 27 by the time you've done this in each chain that you made. Okay, so I'll come back to you when I've got 27. Okay, when you've got your 27 half double crochet, you're going to slip stitch to your first one. Right, and that's giving us the basis for the next step, which is going to be front post half double crochet and back post half double crochet. So if you don't know how to do that, I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to chain 1, yarn over, go around the back of the stem of the stitch, so we're not working into the stitch, go around the back, yarn over, and then complete your half double crochet as you normally would. And that's the first one. And then you're going to go the opposite way, so you're going to bring your hook from the back to the front and out again, so the stem of the stitch is now on the back of your hook, yarn over, pull through 3. So what you get in there is that relief and embossed stitch effect where we're going to sort of make a rib. Okay, so we're going to do the other one again, and then the one coming from the back again. So front post and back post, half double crochet is referred to in the pattern. So again, I'm going to leave you now to do that all the way around. Okay, so I've come back to the beginning now. We've done all our front post and back post. So we're going to slip stitch to the first one again. And then what we've created here is the part that goes at the top of your hand. So we've given it a little bit of stretch so that it won't gape and bag when we're wearing it. So I'll just show you how that'll look. Okay, so that's what we've done so far, the top rib. So we'll carry on. Right, so on this next row, we're going to pull up a tall loop because we don't want to use a chain 1 because we're going to start working in the amigurumi spiral method so we don't end up with a seam down the side. So we're going to pull up a tall loop, yarn over, go in, and we're going to make our HDC into that very first stitch. So we want to make sure we've got 27 stitches again. So now we've done that first pulled up stitch, we can carry on just with ordinary stitches all the way around, and we're just doing half double crochets into each stitch again. Let's do a few more. Yeah, and when you're working into the front post, back post, you'll still have this V at the top to work your next row of stitches into, and this will be an ordinary row. It won't have any rib or stretch to it. Right, so I'll carry on with that row, come back when we're done. Right, so we've come back to that very first stitch where we pulled up the tall loop. So we don't want to slip stitch into there, we want to HDC into there for our next row. So what I'm going to do, because when you start working in a spiral, it's hard to keep track of where the last stitch was. So in stitch number 27, we're going to put a marker. Okay, and then we're just going to carry on HDC. So don't be fooled by that little one from the last round, which was the slip stitch on the last round. we're going into this first HDC, and that will bring together the 2 rows. Okay, so now you can see we're sort of climbing up a step there. You might want to pull that HDC a bit tighter so that you're bridging that gap. Okay, so we're going to do another 27 HDC, and what we'll do is we'll end up in that marked stitch. We'll know that that's stitch number 27. Right, so I've come back to the marked stitch, so I'm going to put my last stitch in there, and then I'm going to move the marker into the last stitch again, just so I don't lose track on the next round. And then we're going to do similar again. We're going to finish this one a little bit differently. So we're going to work round until we've got 25 stitches, HDC in each one again, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I've come to the last 2 stitches now. That was stitch number 25. So in stitch number 26, we're going to do a single crochet instead to bring the height down. And then the last stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch to level off the edge now, so it's not still stepped like it would be the amigurumi method. Okay, so take that marker out, place it into that slip stitch. Right, so now we're going to slip stitch into the next 3 stitches. This is going to form the base of our thumb hole. So we've already slip stitched into there. 3 more we're going to do. 2, 3. Okay, and then once we're in this position, we're going to now chain 1. We're not going to go into that same space because we've already done a slip stitch into there. We're going to HDC into the next stitch. Okay, so we're going to go into each stitch and we'll meet back again. So you're going to do 22 stitches now, back round to the marked stitch. That's including the one we've just done. Right, okay, so the reason we've left another stitch before the marked stitch, so we want 5 stitches to form the opening for the thumb hole, just makes it more comfortable. Okay, so because we're skipping 5, we're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've continued straight on with that last row, but we're skipping all these, and we're actually going to slip stitch right to the very first HDC. Okay, so you can see there that that has formed what will be the thumb hole. So now we just want to work a straight row all the way around to start working again. So be a sec, take that marker out. Okay, so we're going to start working in the amigurumi spiral method again. So we want to make our first HDC into the HDC we've just worked into, otherwise we'd lose a stitch. So we pull up a tall loop and we're going to go into that first stitch. Then we're going to work into each stitch around. We would do if my yarn was behaving itself. I think it's just split a bit, there we go. Okay, tricky one. Right, so that's my first one with the pulled up tall loop. So now I'm going to work into each one around, including the chains. But I will come back to you at that point so we can do that together. So I've done 3 so far on that row. Okay, so I've reached the 22nd stitch. I'm ready to work into my first chain. So that's 23. 24. 25. 26. And the last one there is 27. So I'm going to mark that last stitch because we're going back into the spiral method. Okay, we're going to do one more row of half double crochet. For the full 27 stitches. So we'll meet back there again when we've done another row of 27. So you'll know that's number 27, the marked stitch. Okay, so I've come back now to that marked stitch and you can see I've got a nice thumb hole appeared. Okay, so I'm going to work that last stitch and then replace the marker. Now we need to start reducing or decreasing our stitches so that we can make it fit the narrower part of the hand. So we've gone under the thumb and now we're going to work down towards the wrist. Okay, so we want to start to decrease. So we're going to half double crochet 2 together. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, 3 loops on hook, go into your next stitch, yarn over, pull through, 4 loops on your hook, and then yarn over, pull through all 4. So that has decreased a stitch, but still looks like a half double crochet. And then we're going to work all the way around and do another decrease as we get to this end. So let's work a few more. So by the time we've done that, that'll be 25 stitches. Okay, so I'll meet you at the other end. Right, so I've come back now to those last 2 stitches. So we're going to do the same thing as we did at the beginning, and we're going to reduce or decrease, sorry, like we did before. So we're taking it into 2 stitches, but we're only pulling through for what, as if it was 1. Okay, so that's our last stitch on that row. So now, if we've done that right, we should have 25 stitches. Put that marker back in, just to help us keep track. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to decrease stitches in the same manner. Okay, so obviously make sure you know where you're working. That one's already worked into, so we're in here. HDC 2 together. And again, work our way around. Okay, so we're back to the last 2 stitches again. And we're going to decrease with the HDC 2 together. And there you go. So we've now decreased the amount of stitches enough to fit nicely on a size small around the part of the hand just before your wrist. So I'm going to mark that last stitch. This time we're just going to do one more row of ordinary straight row of half double crochets, and then we're going to do our single crochet slip stitch to level off that top again. So then we can work the cuff. Really quick and easy pattern, this one. Okay, so when we've done that, we'll go on to doing the cuff. Okay, so we've come to the last 2 stitches, and this time we're going to do our single crochet and slip stitch. Just levels it off. Okay, and then we're going to take the marker out. We don't need that anymore. Okay, and then we're going to work on the cuff. We're going to do this exact same thing we did at the top to make this rib, but it's going to be a lot longer, a lot deeper. Okay, so we're going to chain 1, half double crochet in that first stitch and all the way around. And this is going to be our first row of the rib. This time you don't want to HTC into that first, you want to slip stitch into that first one. We want to keep it level for working in rows for the rib. Okay, I've come all the way back round to the beginning. I just wanted to say, don't be fooled by that slip stitch there. We're going into this first HDC with a slip stitch this time. Okay, and just a recap of the front post, back post, we're going to chain 1, go round the back of the post of that first one, yarn over, pull through 3 loops, and then we're going to go around the front with the hook and pull through 3, and we're just going to keep alternating like that until we get back again to the beginning of the round. And this is where our nice rib for the cuff will start. Okay, so we've come back to the very first HDC again with our front post, back post. So I'm just going to slip stitch into there, and then to work your next row, front post, back post, chain 1, yarn over, go around the post that now handily is sticking forward, that one, and then yarn over, pull through 3. Same with the next one. So you're always just working around the post, the vertical part of the stitch each time, either going from the back or from the front. So this is round 2 of the front post, back post. So there's going to be 6 in total. Or you can make your cuff longer if you want to, or shorter. It's just up to you. You can make as many or as few rows of this as you like. And then when you've done that, you simply fasten off and we'll sew in the ends and it's done. But obviously you have to make another one if you want a pair. Okay, so I'll show you what it looks like when I've finished my 6 rows. Okay, so I've come to the end of the 6th row of the rib and I'm just going to fasten off. It's quite quick and easy to make these, as I said. I'm going to fasten that off and let's try it on. Yeah, it's a nice fit. Pleased with that. And you see that the little bit of ribbon on the top's providing a little bit of elasticity around that top part so it's not gaping. And yeah, nice. Keep your wrists and hands warm, but keep your fingers free for using your phone on cold days. Just wanted to add that it doesn't actually matter which hand these go on. There isn't a right and wrong side. So you can make to your heart's content, especially if you're making them for markets, without worrying whether you've made a left or a right hand.